Hello?
Hi. That's Ken Morris.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Hi.
Oh, wow. Oh, what a huge room. You got a lot of people there. Good morning from California.
Morning.
Now, did you all know that I was going to be calling in? I'm Ken Morris with the Frederick Douglass Family Foundation. No? Do you guys know who I am?
Everyone says yes.
Well, my name is Ken Morris, and I am the great-great-great-grandson of Frederick Douglass. And I also happen to be the great-great-grandson of Booker T. Washington. And I'm president of the Frederick Douglass Family Foundation. And you know, every time I tell people what my relationship is to Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, not only is it a mouthful trying to spit out all of those greats, but it sometimes makes me feel very far removed from these two historic giants. You may be sitting there having a hard time trying to imagine what my connection is to both Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. It's like trying to picture what $1 billion looks like with all of those zeros. But just by a show of hands, I can see the room there. How many of you know or knew a grandparent? Anybody? Yeah? Okay, I see a lot of hands. And how many of you may have known a great-grandparent? By a show of hands. Well, that's how close I feel to both Frederick Douglass and to Booker T. Washington, because you see, my great-grandmother, Fanny Douglass, whom I was very close to, she actually met Frederick Douglass when she was a little girl. And my Aunt Portia, whom I was also very close to, was Booker T. Washington's daughter. And I remember being a little boy and sitting on my great-grandmother Fanny's lap as she would tell me what it was like to meet, as she would call him, the man with the great big white hair. And I remember sitting on my Aunt Portia's lap, and she would tell me about her father, Booker T. Washington. And they both lived to be over 100 years old. And when I stopped to think that hands that actually touched the great Frederick Douglass and hands that touched the great Booker T. Washington also touched mine, in a sense, I can say I stand just one person away from history. We're not that far removed from our history. Now, I know that I've always descended from these great men, these true American heroes, but I've never really much celebrated it, and that's because when I was younger, the few times that I did tell people of my relationship, nobody ever believed me, and I never thought that it was a point worth arguing. And I'm embarrassed to say that I was well into my 30s before I started to appreciate the significance of this incredible lineage and this blood that I have that runs through my veins. So you're probably sitting there asking yourself, what changed in my life? Why have I now started to so fully embrace something that I had spent most of my life running away from? Well, about 4 years ago, a friend of mine handed me a National Geographic magazine, and the cover story was 21st Century Slaves. And I looked at that headline, and I reacted as most people do, I think, when they hear about the existence of modern-day slavery and human trafficking for the first time. And I thought that slavery had ended. I thought it had ended with the work of Frederick Douglass and the abolitionists and the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. But as I started to do my research, and at the time, my girls, I have 2 daughters, and at the time they were 12 and 9 years old. And when I found that there were girls that were forced to be sex slaves in the brothels of Southeast Asia, and that there were girls my daughter's ages and younger that were forced to be sex slaves right here in the United States of America, I couldn't look my girls in the eyes and walk away from that. I mean, I remember sitting down and reading that magazine in my living room, and in the next room I could hear my wife reading bedtime stories to my daughters, and they were laughing and they were getting ready for bed, and I remember thinking, this is what young girls should be doing. They should be laughing and getting ready to be tucked safely into bed, and I'm looking at this magazine and I just can't wrap my mind around it. And I walked in to say goodnight to my girls, and I couldn't look them in the eyes. I can see in the room there that there are many students, and I also see some adults. And for those of you that are older, you may remember the Alex Haley series, Roots, just by a show of hands. Do you guys remember? Any of you remember Roots? Well, for those of you that may not know what Roots is, Alex Haley was an author, and he traced his family all the way back to Africa. And the ABC network produced a miniseries in the 70s, and it ran for a full week, and millions of people watched that miniseries, and they were glued. And it was really the first time this country had seen what historic slavery looks like. And I remember being a little boy and watching that miniseries and thinking, if I lived during that time, I would be an abolitionist. I would be a Frederick Douglass. I mean, I think all of us believe that. We wouldn't sit back and suffer those types of injustices, and that we would fight for those that can't fight for themselves and speak for those that can't speak for themselves. But the problem with that thinking is that I could never prove that to myself, because you're talking about crimes of the past. Now all of a sudden, here I am looking at this National Geographic magazine, and I'm faced with this present-day crime, and I just couldn't look my girls in the eyes and walk away from it. I mean, I've got this platform that my ancestors have built through struggle and through sacrifice, and I knew that I could really leverage the historical significance of my ancestry to stand up and to really do something about this issue. So my mom and I, Nettie Washington Douglass, and just by the way, I'll just tell you quickly how the two families came together. It happened on my mom's side of the family. My grandfather, Frederick Douglass III, was Frederick Douglass's great-grandson, and my grandmother, Nettie Hancock Washington, was Booker T. Washington's granddaughter. Now, the two of them met in 1940 in Tuskegee, Alabama, at Tuskegee Institute, which was the school that Booker T. Washington founded in 1881. And they were walking across campus, and they literally bumped into each other. Didn't know that the other descended from an historic family. It was love at first sight, and they wound up getting married 3 months later. And when my mom, Nettie Washington Douglass, was born, she was the first person to unite the bloodlines of these historic families. Now, she was an only child, so when she married my dad, I was the first male. I have the honor and the privilege and the blessing to be the first male to unite the bloodlines of the family. So that's how the two families came together, or collided, as we like to say. So my mom and I started the Frederick Douglass Family Foundation in 2007, and we have a twofold mission, and the first part of our mission is the obvious, and that's to carry on and perpetuate the legacies of these two great heroes. But the second part of our mission is to raise awareness about human trafficking and modern-day slavery. And the way that we go about educating the public is where we believe education should start, and that's with young people. And we go into schools with service learning projects, and I know this is exactly why I'm talking to you today, because Mrs. M found out about the work that we're doing, and we feel very honored to be able to work with you all on our service learning projects in the spring semester, and then as we move forward. So I know I only have a few minutes this morning, so I'm just going to go ahead and wrap up. I just wanted to tell you a quick little story that really kind of fits into everything that I've been feeling about the work that I'm doing. Because I've been able to find this mission on my own, and it wasn't forced on me, it's much more meaningful. And about a year ago, I was at the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site in Washington, D.C., and it's where he spent the last 17 years of his life. And I was there for his birthday celebration, which is celebrated on February 14th. Now, by the way, he didn't know when he was born. He was born a slave, and there were no records, and he estimated that he was born in 1817. It turns out that he was actually born in 1818. But he chose February 14th as his birthday because his grandmother used to call him her little Valentine. So I was there a year ago, February, and I was speaking to a group of young people, and this young girl raised her hand. She was probably about 12 years old, and she said, "Mr. Morris, what must it be like to walk in the shoes of Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington?" And I thought, wow, that's really a deep question. And in my time when I lived in Washington, D.C., which is where I was born, And when I was a student, we used to go on field trips to the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site, and I had probably been on maybe 9 or 10 field trips as a student. And when you walk through the house and tour, upstairs in his bedroom, on his bed, is his nightshirt. And on the bed next to, or excuse me, on a chair next to the bed is his hat. And then on the floor is a pair of his shoes. And you know how when you go into a museum and you always have that velvet rope, that red velvet rope that blocks the room off so that you can't get in, basically telling you that you're not VIP status? Well, that rope would block his room. And I would look at those shoes, and I remember being younger, and I would always want to sneak past that velvet rope to try those shoes on. Well, this day in February, they actually took us on a VIP tour, and they took us upstairs as they usually do, and we got to the room, and for the first time in my life, they actually took down that rope, and they let us in the room. And there were about 20 or 25 of us that were in that really small room, so we were jammed together, shoulder to shoulder. And the press was there, and they were asking us questions and taking pictures. And you know where they put me? They put me right next to the shoes. And I looked down, and we were like this, crammed together. I looked down, and I said, there they are. After all of these years, I'm standing right next to the shoes, and all I would have to do is slip off my shoes and then just step right into them, and I would be walking in the shoes of Frederick Douglass. But I never did. I never tried those shoes on because I knew that they wouldn't fit. Those shoes are too big for any of us to fit into. But what I realized at that moment is that I can take the shoes that I've got, and you all can take the shoes that you've got, and we can lead the way to a brighter future, and we can lead the way to a better tomorrow, and each and every one of us can make a difference in the lives of those around us, and just like Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington, go on to affect the lives of so many people. And with that, I want to thank you very much for inviting me to say hello to you this morning. Please visit our website, which is FDFF.org. That's the acronym for Frederick Douglass Family Foundation. I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you, and I know that we're going to be planning a visit so that I can come and visit with you in person within the next couple of months or so. So with that, thank you so much. I wish you the best of success with the rest of your program this morning, and God bless each and every one of you. Thank you. Hi.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we're all wrapped up. Our message here today